One, thank you guys for coming out to our showcase. My name is Brianna Leanne Jones, and I'll be leading this or emceeing it for tonight. So one of the things that we just ask is that you don't move the chairs around in order for us to stay within COVID protocols. They've all been spaced out correctly, and we ask that you keep your mask on. However, for our speakers, as they're going to be up here, and we've made sure that there's enough space, they will remove their mask while talking and then put them on before returning back to their seats. So I guess as you guys know from our flyer, we're going to be talking about social justice tonight. And the Center for Economic and Social Justice defines social justice as a guide or virtue for the way that we have human interactions within the institutions that we are a part of. And also in social justice, it imposes each of us to design and develop with a team of people on how we interact and perfect the institutions we're a part of. So whether that is socially or personally, it puts us all into a call of action on correcting just the spaces we inhabit. And so tonight, the speeches you hear will range in so many different topics, whether about sexuality, Title IX, civility, and museums. But each of these have an important aspect when it comes to social justice and just perfecting the institutions, as I stated before. So the first speaker you'll hear tonight is Kevin Nguyen, who is a junior from North Kansas City, Missouri. And he'll be talking about his piece on 10 questions.
Cool, real quick, I just want to make sure, am I too loud? Good? Good where I'm at? Cool, all right. Just get situated, sorry. Okay. So you ever notice how awkward it is when you meet someone and you want to get to know them, right? But you don't really know how to approach getting to know them? I mean, maybe it's the fact that you don't even know the person, but I mean, let's be real. Hookup culture. Now, I'm not saying it's inevitable that every single person you have this awkward interaction with will end up in your bed, but let's be real, it is awkward. And you begin talking to the person and find that the conversation is slow advancing. So you, or they, suggest that you play this game of 10 questions. Now, the purpose of this event is to talk about issues of social justice, including things like racism and discrimination and LGBT plus issues and so much more. However, I feel like in order to better set you all up for this event, I should allow us to get better acquainted. So let's do it. Let's play a game of 10 questions, but in an effort to spice things up a little bit, let's try it this way. A game of 10 questions that I've been asked by people like you, asked your way, answered my way. Y'all ready? No? Okay, well, let's start anyways. 1, what's your favorite food? Well, I don't really have a favorite food, but I do have a favorite cuisine, Italian. Next question. 2, what's your favorite color? Well, my favorite color, scratch that, colors are navy blue and maroon. I don't know why, but I just feel like they exude success and class. I mean, all things that we want in life, am I right? No, just me? Okay, next question. 3, what are your interests? Now, I feel like this is a loaded question. I mean, we are all getting to know each other, but I feel like some of my answers may not be appropriate for a group setting in a room full of leaders and officers and whatnot. So here's this. I enjoy ensuring that I fulfill all of my duties and all of my roles, being productive and exercising and eating regularly and being social. But you know, the interacting with people, it brings me this overwhelming joy, and it really is just overwhelming and, overwhelmingly pleasant to constantly keep this smile on my face while interacting with people and socializing. But I have to be a bit honest, I don't really enjoy all of those things all that much, but I guess that's one of the problems with being asked a question like this in a setting like this. The fear of being reprimanded for my responses. It's just tough because so much is expected of me as a leader and a student and a role model that hinges on my sociability and my appropriateness, so I guess I just feel irresponsible saying that anything else is my answer. Like, yeah, I'm human, but also I'm me. The me that people see and want to see, and that's what's important, so it just feels irresponsible having anything else be my answer. But in all reality, I just enjoy sleeping and eating and sleeping and just being lazy, not being social. I mean, it's so hard for some people to understand that sometimes I just don't want to interact with people or socialize with people. But I guess I signed up for it, so kind of my fault. Next question. 4. Now, this one's important. What's your favorite type of music? Well, I think the more important question is, what's your favorite type of music? I mean, I just feel like that's important because I just, No? I still have to answer? Okay. Well, my favorite type of music is alternative, alt pop, R&B, pop. I have a really huge music library, so pretty much anything other than screamo or metal. What? How big is it? Well, have you ever heard the punchline, is that a water bottle in your pants, or are you... Oh. Is that your next question? Cool. Question 5, how big is your music library? Now that we got that cleared up, I haven't recently counted my music library, but there has to be well over 1,200 songs on there. Next question. 6. What are you going to school for? Well, this is a great question. As you all know, I go to school here at Northwest Missouri State University, but what you might not know is that I'm majoring in criminology with a psychology minor. And before you ask if I want to be like Reed from Criminal Minds, the answer is yes. I do want to be like Reed from Criminal Minds, but everyone wants to be like Reed from Criminal Minds, so that's not the career field I'm pursuing, though. I'm actually pursuing a career as a clinical social worker, basically working on the counseling side of social work. The reason I want to do this is to serve a population that is statistically lower class and to shift the narrative on, 1, the stigma around mental health and mental wellness, 2, the stigma around serving lower class or underprivileged populations, and 3, well, I'm highly passionate about helping others and have a major interest in criminology, sociology, and psychology, and this career field really just incorporates all of those things. Now, before I start listing more numbers and getting you confused about what question we're on, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. 7. So your last name is Nguyen? I had an Asian friend back home, I think, and I think that was their last name. Does that mean you're Asian? Yeah, good question. Moving on. No, I'm just kidding. While it's not pronounced Nguyen, you may hear it pronounced different ways, probably one of 2 ways. Nguyen or just Win. Personally, I prefer Win because who doesn't want a name with a champion-like ring to it, and also it's just more easy. There also are actual Vietnamese ways of pronouncing the name, but even then you'll hear it pronounced differently because of different dialects and whatnot. Also, you are correct, I am Asian, but I'm actually mixed race, believe it or not. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but if you need an easy way to remember what mix I am, keep it in here, not in here. I like to say that I am a panda bear, black, white, and Asian. More specifically, Vietnamese, and that is Vietnamese. Not Vietminese. I'm not going to Viet your anything. Next question. 8. What's your family like? Oh, well, they're awesome. I have 4 siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters who are all older and either in professional full-time work or working part-time and in school like myself. My parents have been together for over 20 years, and that's super dope considering the fact that they were in an arranged marriage. But honestly, I love and admire the heck out of my family. But I just feel like maybe that answer wasn't quite what some of you might have been looking for. So here's this. I have 4 siblings that are all older, and they uphold our cultural and familial values of hard work and success. My parents are both originally from Vietnam and immigrated here in 1993 with $50 and 2 boxes of ramen, no real understanding of the English language, and a dream to make a future for themselves and their future children. My parents have always encouraged and expected and reminded that us children work hard to achieve the things that they had to fight like hell for. that we work hard to succeed, which is funny because that's probably why my favorite colors are navy blue and maroon. The underlying meaning of those colors represent the expectations that my parents have always held me to. Next question. 9. What's your biggest fear? Look, I'm just going to be honest. My biggest fear is disappointment. I could say something like being buried alive, but in all reality, a disappointment is my biggest fear. And the hardest part is that I'm pretty sure it stems from that constant expectation and reminder growing up that I work hard and accomplish much and succeed at everything. But beyond that, navigating this world with so many opportunities to disappoint people has been so hard, especially with something as simple as being true to myself and the parts of me that make me who I am. When you think about me, an outspoken, cisgendered, mixed-race, gay, litho-romantic, gray-sexual individual, in addition to being a fraternity man and a community leader, an accredited public speaker, and so much more, and then thinking about how those parts of me intersect with every other part of my life. My social life, my heritage, my culture, my professional life, and everything in between. That, in and of itself, presents a plethora of opportunity for disappointment. And when you think about that and look at that, it's like so much of me is expected to be less than for the sake of simplicity and maintaining normalcy, to make it easier for others so that they don't have to wrestle with the complexities that is me. Next question. Final question. 10. Why do you care so much about what other people do or say? Now listen, I can't judge anyone for asking questions that they're curious about and don't know the answer to. I try to always be conscientious about empathizing and being understanding, but when you ask me a question like, why do you care so much? All I can do is answer honestly. And it's great because the answers really relate to the very purpose of this event. When we talk about the complexities of intersectionality and identity and how that plays out in a social setting, or even about the inequity that people like me experience every single day of their lives, and the fact that the purpose of this event is not to judge or ridicule anyone, but rather to shed light on the complexities that may compose any one single person. That is why I care so much. I care about the children growing up in homes where they're fearful to speak and in fear of saying the wrong thing, or the fear of being true to themselves and the parts of them that make them who they are, like their race and sexuality and gender and more, and the fear of being open and honest about those parts of themselves to people like us. The fear that people who don't want to walk alone at night experience due to the potential that they may be harassed or sexually assaulted. The fear that a voice, a message may go unheard or be drowned out by excuses and complacency and hate and patriarchy and norms and expectations. For the fear that a person like me may experience walking into a place labeled a shared space, with the underlying message that it's a shared space for those who are alike, not those who are different. Not those who are people like me. And for the fact that people who are watching this, or may watch this, may still continue to wallow in their complacency and blindness and hate, and complain that I, or we, my team, are just complaining. These are the reasons I care so much. I hope you've all enjoyed this game of 10 questions, and I hope you look forward to these other speeches. Thank you.
Amazing, for sure. So I guess in your speech, you talk a lot about how you are a lot more than just, the labels people put on you. How would you recommend that the audience or those listening are able to celebrate people's differences without being insensitive in the questions that they're asking you?
I think one of the biggest things and a common response that I give towards a question like this is education. I think one of the biggest things that people can do is educate themselves about differences, because that's one of the biggest things that separates us, is the ignorance to difference. You know, a lot of people, they're taught the things that they grow up and experience, and if they don't do the work proactively to counteract what they may have learned or to look at things other than what they may have learned growing up, then they'll never have any other worldview, and they remain in, you know, what I mentioned, that complacency and that norm, you know, upholding the social structures that have been in place for centuries, and put people like myself, like other people in this room, in fear of being who they are and being true to themselves.
Wow, thank you, Kevin. You're awesome. It's pretty cool. Okay, so for our next speaker, it is one, she's iconic, and she recently won like 6th place in nationals, so it's like a pretty big deal. And her name is Natalie Code, and she's from Lawrence, Kansas, and she's going to, I guess, just wow us. Natalie Code.
Hello? Oh, there we are. Hi. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay. In 2016, the Science Museum of Minnesota displayed a plaque which stated the following: "The staff and board of the Science Museum of Minnesota join the community in mourning the tragic killing of Philando Castile." The sign was up for less than 5 days and was removed when angry patrons criticized the museum for taking sides. Similarly, last June, the director of the Toledo Museum of Art stated that while he condemned the killing of Black Americans, their museum was committed to retaining a non-partisan stance. A 2018 article in the Journal of Museums and Social Issues argues that museums have historically positioned themselves above political, social, and racial issues, embracing a careful neutrality. Yet museums are not neutral spaces. Cultural institutions play a critical role in shaping national values, and according to a 2018 survey by the American Association of State and Local History, 81% of respondents reported placing their absolute trust in museums' presentations of historic truths. However, a 2017 Journal of Folklore and Education article points out that more often than not, museum spaces have been dominated by white history and white truth, leaving little room for the narratives of non-white, marginalized communities. It's no surprise then that many non-white visitors feel unwelcome in museum spaces, reflected by History Museum's 12% minority visitation rate per a 2010 NEA study. Particularly in the wake of George Floyd's death, museums nationwide have begun to acknowledge their perpetuation of racist structures and express their commitment to addressing institutional injustices. But intention is not the same as action. It is imperative that we examine how museums are tackling racist practices and attempting to position themselves as places of social justice. To do so, we will first contextualize racist museum practices regarding what has been displayed and who has done the talking. Next, we'll look at actions museums are taking to address those injustices before finally discussing the implications that arise when museums embrace inclusivity and reject neutrality. In the last 10 years, many conversations regarding racist representations of history have focused on the removal of Confederate monuments. But what about racial issues within museum spaces? Disparities can be seen through the narrative and the narrator. First, the narrative. In 2019, statisticians at Williams College examined the full collections of 18 major US art museums. Among the 10,108 individual artists, 85% were white and 1.2% were Black. Adding insult to injury, when diverse narratives are featured, their nuance and context are habitually rejected in favor of risk-free simplicity. A 2019 article in the Journal of Museum Management and Curatorship notes that non-white exhibit topics like music, food, and art are deemed safe, celebratory practices and oftentimes prioritized over difficult themes like conquest and racial discrimination. Furthermore, according to a 2018 publication by the National Museum for World Cultures, exclusionary practices are not always limited to collections. Labels featuring terms like civilized and primitive, the classification of exhibits as ethnic, And even the subtle usage of we and them on display panels all linguistically otherizes non-Western groups. When museums neglect, simplify, or otherize non-white narratives, they diminish the histories and contributions made by people of color. Second, the narrator. The 1999 book Museum Exhibitions and the Dynamics of Dialogue notes that for centuries, white, educated curators were the sole voices of curatorial authority within museums. As such, they regularly spoke on behalf of other cultures, which privileges a singular Eurocentric perspective, per the former museum management article. And since the 2017 article in the journal Dimensions revealed that less than 20% of executive museum staff members are from minority backgrounds, very few POC histories are told by people of color in America. This exclusion is perpetuated by museum positions that require master's degrees and their privileging of experience provided by unpaid internships, which are a financial impossibility for lower-income students. The following are real-world steps museums are taking to address these institutional injustices. Initially, the narrative. The 2017 Museums as Site for Social Action, or Mass Action Toolkit, encourages museums to examine how legacies of colonialism, racism, and white privilege have shaped their institutions. Examples of this include the Minneapolis Museum of Art's intention to return African objects they acquired as spoils of colonialism, or the Perry McMillan Arctic Museum's public acknowledgement of their museum's racist founders and current all-white staff. The toolkit also urges museum educators to attend to absence and forgotten perspectives. For example, Director of National Museums Liverpool explains that his institutions create nuanced narratives by pushing visitors to see past tangible artifacts and search for what isn't there. You can see beautiful historic homes, but the slave labor that built them is not so visible. The 2018 book Interpreting Difficult History furthers that in letting fear and shame limit exhibit narratives, museums erase historic truths and squander opportunities for growth. To combat this, the Wing Luke and West Baton Rouge museums have students read Islamophobic 9/11 newspaper articles and take 20th century voter literacy tests. In doing so, they directly confront the difficult histories that some would rather forget. Next, the narrator. Many museums have realized that simply hiring a diverse staff does little to solve the systemic issues of inequitable museum employment and diverse storytelling. So, to provide minority students with the experience many museums require, the Mellon Foundation funds paid museum internships for students from marginalized backgrounds. Going a step further, the Museum of Art and History in Santa Cruz is redefining museum position qualifications by minimizing advanced degree requirements and prioritizing first-hand cultural knowledge. MAH is removing barriers that prevent talented candidates from applying in the first place. Lastly, the Wing Luke Museum has employed community advisory committees for over 30 years, a collaborative model which other museums are beginning to adopt. They bring in community members with lived experience and relevant expertise to co-create exhibits, effectively upending the traditional, sole, all-knowing curator. Many of the US's 35,000 museums have announced their commitment to anti-racist inclusivity. Some museum endeavors have fostered real change, while others have been empty and performative. Their efforts, successful and otherwise, raise critical implications in the form of social justice education and tokenism. First, social justice education. The phrase, museums are not neutral, references the hypocrisy of museums creating exhibits about, say, the civil rights movement, while simultaneously staying silent about the ongoing struggles for racial justice in America, as if oppression exists exclusively in the past. In recognition of this, many institutions are actively bridging the gap between historic and modern injustices through exhibits and educational programming. For example, an exhibit at the Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site connects past overrepresentations of people of color in prisons to current racial disparities in the prison industrial complex. Similarly, students at the Contemporary Jewish Museum read centuries-old articles about segregation while making comparisons to instances of 21st century racism. By prioritizing social justice education, museums do more than just teach us about the past. They help us learn from the present. Next, tokenism. While a growing number of museums are declaring their anti-racist intentions, It remains to be seen how many will be satisfied with mere performative diversity. One example of hollow representation is when Black history exhibits appear on February 1st and disappear 28 days later. The 2011 book Representing Enslavement and Abolition in Museums notes that community consultation can result in a similar tokenism. After being brought in to consult on an abolition exhibit, one community member said it seemed like the museum was just ticking a box and had no intention of incorporating their ideas. When people of color are brought to the table but simultaneously afforded no power to make change, museums are essentially commodifying communities of color to raise visitation rates or avoid controversy. Today, we've seen examples of racist museum practices, examined how museums are attempting to become places of social justice, and discussed the implications of their success and failure to do so. As a true lover of museums and an aspiring museum professional, I understand how difficult it can be to wrestle with the colonialism, elitism, and racism that permeate the very fabric of every museum. Yet difficulty does not negate necessity. Museums have feared taking sides, but cultural institutions that choose to remain neutral in the face of racism are on the wrong side of history.
Oh, one, thank you, Natalie, for your speech. And I guess to add additional context to your speech, can you speak a little bit about museums' evolution as it pertains to racial injustice?
Yeah, so museums have historically been embedded with colonialism. So in the 16th century, we saw some of the first private museums, and they were basically rich white people's way of showing off all the stuff that they'd collected from their travels abroad. And by collected, I mean took physically. And then in the 19th and 20th centuries, we saw kind of a transition from that towards museums being places to showcase power and national influence, which was kind of done so by showcasing objects that they had taken from places that they had conquered, which plays a large role in some of the stereotypes and perceptions that we have of people from Africa and the Americas, that kind of thing. And then today we've seen kind of a shift towards a by the people, for the people mentality. So more community building, more public education. In the 20th century, museums didn't really have education programs, education departments, that kind of thing. So kind of transitioning into that and having people with more diverse voices are starting to be able to tell their stories, that kind of thing. So a little bit of context.
Thank you. So in your conclusion, you mentioned how you are an aspiring museum professional.
Yeah.
And so how do you plan in the future to promote social justice in your workplace?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what aspect of the museum I'm working in. Right now I'm planning on specializing in collections management, so working directly with objects, which kind of will bring up a lot of really interesting and really important conversations about repatriation, which is when objects are returned to where they were originally from, if they were not from America, or if they are not, or if they were from indigenous people, that kind of thing. And so I'm hoping to work a lot with NAGPRA, especially in this part of the country. NAGPRA is really important. It's the National Native American Graves and Protection Reappropriation Act, which basically says that museums that receive federal funding legally and they're required to return objects that have very specific cultural value to Native American tribes. And so it's a very long, very important process, and so I'm hoping to kind of work with that. And then, yeah, just any, I am a white woman. I am not underrepresented in any way in museum spaces, and so I'm really hoping to be able to do anything I can to make sure that my voice is not the only one that's being heard, because for a long time that has been the case. So,
thank you so much, Natalie. Can we give her another hand? So our next speaker tonight is Brian Swafford, who is a professor over in the Communication and Mass Media Department. And he's from Georgia, I believe, and he'll just be giving us a speech about the word civility. So Brian Swafford.
This is going to be a little weird. It's the first time I've talked without a mask on in a year. Huh. Also, I wear 2 masks because with this beard, you kind of got to control it. So, all right. Bearcats practice civility is a phrase that we have heard a lot over the last year. The concept of being civil, of engaging in civility, is something that we aspire to. And it speaks to the ideals of an institution of higher learning like a university, where our goal should be to present information, challenge ideas, and create a space to consider new perspectives. Civility is the ultimate goal of a university. That is something that is vital to our environment. If we can't be civil to one another, how can we hear what each of us is saying? So I don't want to criticize how important the work being done by those that are on our campus and the work that we're doing in our classrooms, in our various offices. That is absolutely important in creating an inclusive and just community. But having said that, civility has always rubbed me the wrong way as a goal we should aspire to. And so I want to talk tonight about issues that come with civility when it is used as a weapon by those that are bad faith actors. So today I'm going to talk about the problems with civility, their causes, and some solutions. To start off, last May, you may remember the story of Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper. They are not related. But this is the story of Christian Cooper, a black man who was out birdwatching in New York City's Central Park. He then came across Amy Cooper, a white woman who was out with her dog. She had her dog off the leash. He asked her to please put the dog back on the leash, because in that part of the park, that's what's supposed to happen. Amy Cooper's response was not, "Oh, I'm so sorry, let me get my dog." Her response was to call the police, to fake tears, and to claim that he was threatening her. Now, if this wasn't all on video, where at the time it had millions of views, Christian Cooper could have been in a bad way. And this gets to this idea of one of the problems that comes with appeals to civility without that deeper understanding. It works within an existing social power structure. While Christian Cooper was calm throughout the conversation, if you watch the video and listen to him, he does not raise his voice, he keeps his distance, he constantly is asking for her to just engage in the normal practices. She doesn't. And she doesn't because she knows that society will protect her, the white woman, against what is perceived as the aggressive black man. Amy Cooper pretended that she was being threatened and in need of immediate help, and she used this as a way of trying to decide who gets to be civil. You see, Amy Cooper decided that her version of civility, her privilege, allowed her that opportunity. That was one of the problems. Now, when the police showed up, they looked at Christian Cooper's video. They saw that what she was telling them wasn't exactly what happened, and she ultimately faced consequences. So there was some justice in that instance, but it's something to be concerned about. When those that have privilege also get to decide what is civil and what is not, they can use that power to shut down discussions they don't like. And when we are addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can't allow discomfort to be our guiding principle. And that's one of the things that is important. Additionally, and this is probably where it rubs me the most wrong, is that civility is often used as a shield to protect people from criticism, and this gets into the whole debate me crowd. You're probably familiar with them. You've seen them on social media. They're the ones that want to do the debate me about whatever it is, or there's that meme of the guy sitting behind the card table saying, "Try and change my mind." Now, I could talk a lot about that particular guy. I don't want to mention him because he's not a good person, but the best story about him recently involved him kidnapping a cat and holding it for ransom. The other stories are way worse. Not a great guy. But that's what happens. So these are usually, and I say this, I'm acknowledging who they are, usually young white men who spend way too much time on the internet, who think about that debate will solve all their problems. Now, as someone who is a child of debaters, who every member of my family is a debater, who debated in high school and in college, who teaches debate and has coached debate for over a decade, let me just be clear about this. Debaters suck. They're the worst. They're so bad. They are annoying, and I don't like them. and I am them. I know what I'm talking about because they look just like me. They are the worst, okay? Probably the best way of putting this, author Celeste Ng said in a tweet, as a former debater, I think that the debate mentality is a huge part of the problem with our public discourse. Debate, which many aspiring lawyers do in school, teaches you to treat everything like an academic thought experiment, rather than real issues that affect actual humans. So if you're familiar with the Change My Mind meme or the Debate Me crowd, they want to tell you that if we just debate it out, we can get to some sort of truth. But the reality is they don't want to get to truth. They don't want to get to understanding. They want to use their position and their privilege and their viewpoint to create a spectacle. They want to get you mad. They want to own the libs or own the cons if you're going the other way too. It's not really about politics for them. It's more about getting somebody else upset. It's weird, and I don't get it. So one of the things that we have to be careful about, when we're engaging in debates about debating things that represent the lived experiences of others. Debates about bathroom bills or trans athletes being able to play sports that are aligned with their gender identity, about same-sex marriage or same-sex couples being able to adopt children. If that doesn't affect you, you can think debating it is harmless. But if you're part of one of those communities, debating it means that you first have to debate your own humanity about whether or not you deserve the same rights and privileges and access that anyone else has. And so we should be careful about engaging in those types of things. So it requires us to be knowledgeable and careful about our actions. So we live in a society like everyone else. We shouldn't allow for debates about humanity of someone else, even if we do it in a civil tone. If civility can be used both as sword and shield, as it can be when used poorly, why do we still aspire to it? Well, there's lots of really good reasons, but some of the reasons why the problematic elements of it come about are because of issues like elitism and bad faith actors. First is elitism. You know who loves civility? Rich, fancy people. As Bree told you, I grew up in Georgia, and you want to know about elitism? Let me tell you about cotillion. Cotillion, or a debutante ball, is where the children of the rich, fancy people that can trace their lineage back to the big, fancy plantations, they get together and they learn proper morals and etiquette, and they have dance, and they wear fancy dresses. You know what they love? Civility. You know what they don't like? Anything that's uncomfortable, aside from the dresses. I'm assuming those are really uncomfortable. I don't know, but that's whatever. Southerners look at this as a rite of passage. Young men and women of high society are taught things so we know what they exist. Now, I don't know about high society events in other elements of the country or other areas, but I do know they exist. I grew up in the South, so I know those folks. And it is just one of those things that was always weird. When elites in a society are taught things like civility and proper order, then anything that seems out of order to them is wrong, unworthy, and low. And so you have to be careful about those types of things because it's teaching future generations. Beyond the ideas of heritage and elitism, there are some folks that are just bad faith actors. A bad faith actor is someone who uses deception and hypocrisy to make their point. For example, we can consider recent accusations of sexual harassment by members of Congress. During the height of the Me Too movement, several sitting members of Congress were accused of sexual harassment. Then Senator Al Franken of Minnesota was accused by Leanne Tweeden, a conservative talk radio host, of forcing an unwanted kiss on her during a 2006 USO tour. Republican lawmakers called on Franken to resign since the Democrats had said those accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment shouldn't be in office. Franken ultimately did resign. Now, did the Republican members of Congress who were similarly accused resign immediately because that was the standard they established? Dear God, no. They served out their terms. Some of them were reelected. And that's what we mean by a bad faith actor, someone who is using the good ideas and the policies that uplift and seek for equity and inclusion and use that to punish their opponents while ignoring them conveniently for their own perspectives. So we've got to be careful. So how do we fix it? Well, first, we should make sure that appeals to civility are not a tool used to prevent meaningful discourse on challenging or uncomfortable topics. If you have attended any of the events sponsored by our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, you know that they do not shy away from necessary discussions on difficult topics. Like, if we're going to be better, we kind of have to wrestle with some of the stuff we've done in the past, and they've done an excellent job in that. It doesn't mean those events aren't civil. They absolutely are. But it means that they are being rooted in concepts like justice and equity. So we should work to find issues like justice, equity, and equality in a situation first and foremost, even if that makes us uncomfortable. Second, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I want to remind you of the words of Dr. King, and I know a white guy bringing up Dr. King is kind of like a notes app in social media. When you see it, you know something bad happened or something super racist happened, and I'm hoping I haven't done that. So I'm not talking about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, which most people bring up. Instead, I want to reference Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Dr. King said, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but can't agree with your methods of direct action,' who paternalistically feel he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season." Dr. King's words live on because they were so prescient. They mattered then, and they matter just as much now. The world is messy and complicated. We can try our best to do right by one another and still mess up. The best advice I can give is to learn from others. This is where social media can be a useful tool. I know that it's usually a terrible, terrible place, but it can be useful. There are many people who are sharing their views and experiences and stories in a public space so that you can learn from them. And that is something that's important. Find those accounts on Instagram, on Twitter, or any other social media app, and that will share the views and voices of those that are willing to share. It also prevents you from going up and tracking down your one friend to tell you all about the lived experience, because their experience is not monolith. Find those voices and learn from them. Just remember that just because you hear one story, it doesn't mean you know all of the stories now. By being more empathetic on how we treat others, it will address a lot of what ails us. So today we've looked at the dark side of civility. Civility can be used as a weapon by those who want to avoid discomfort or accountability. Our job is to recognize the good from the bad, to find, as Dr. King put it, the positive peace. There aren't easy answers, and there will be some discomfort, but we can get through it together if we try. We want to be civil, but we also want to find justice, and that should be our guiding principle. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Swaff. You're so amazing. I guess the one question I have, specifically as a student, and I'm guessing the students also in here who are, I guess, motivated to create change in like just the institutions that we are in. So when we have those meetings or those conversations and we're trying to be the civil one where the other person is just not on the same playing field, whether that's by their leadership position or just them using their privilege, then how do we even begin to start having those conversations?
That is the biggest challenge that we often face. And so for us, the first thing that is important is you never want to put yourself in a dangerous position, so you always kind of have to evaluate the scene, and is this safe for you to kind of have those conversations? To find those safe places where the people you're talking about, they might have a misunderstanding, there might be an opportunity to engage with them in a meaningful way, then have those conversations. Those are meaningful. If somebody doesn't want to do that, if somebody is using harmful rhetoric, is ignoring the lived experience of other people, I think that the best thing that you can do is make note of that and remove yourself from the situation, because you're not going to change their mind. You're not going to alleviate the situation. And then utilize the resources that are available. Use the office like the offices like the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. This is also where those that look a lot like me, where the straight white guy, I have all of the privilege, to use the privilege for good. And so if you see those things, use your privilege to stand up for the people that are being ignored or worse, treated poorly, and create a safe space for them by using your privilege as a shield.
Wow, thank you so much. You're amazing, Swaff. Can we give him another hand? Awesome. So our last speaker for tonight, and thank you guys for just tuning in for this far. You guys are so great. And this one's going to be like a showstopper. And her name is Baylen Porter, and she's from Springfield, Missouri, and she's a senior this year. So please give it up for Baylen.
It's going to be weird holding a mic. We don't do that in competition. Through tears, a 14-year-old student from Carroll City High School in Miami explained and provided a written statement that she had been sexually assaulted by 3 boys in the bathroom of her school. "I think I have been raped," is what she told administration. The next day, according to The 74, a nonprofit, nonpartisan news site focusing on education in America, on August 6, 2019, reported that administration decided not only to suspend the boys for 10 days, but also suspend the victim because she violated the school rule of inappropriate sexual behavior. In Fayetteville, Georgia, a 14-year-old student was sexually assaulted by a male classmate. The principal brushed off the seriousness of her allegations. He labeled it sexual impropriety. The August 27, 2019 Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that the victim was expelled for her actions. The Me Too movement and subsequent national conversation on sexual assault has created a space for survivors to step forward. However, the one place where there has been very little conversation is our nation's high schools. The National Violence Resource Center reported that 1 in 4 women will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as RAIN, reported that women aged 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely to be sexually assaulted or raped than the general population. On our college campuses, the Title IX process is far from perfect. However, it comes nowhere close to how severe the K-12 system functions. In K-12, most school districts don't have clear Title IX policies or a qualified Title IX coordinator. Students are being sexually harassed, assaulted, and abused. As story after story demonstrates, when they come forward to talk about their experiences, they are punished and retaliated against. It is horrid and detestable that the price a student pays for speaking up puts them in the same place as their abuser. Today, we will address the issues of high school Title IX policies, the causes, and offer some solutions. In Alabama, a 14-year-old student was raped by a 16-year-old student. Instead of acting immediately, the school wanted the girl to help them catch him in the act. She was raped a second time when teachers did not show up to prevent it. This demonstrates the twofold problem: sexual assault in schools and victim punishment. Initially, sexual assault, harassment, and rape are all too common in occurrence for high school students. The National Center on Education Statistics on July 27, 2019, reported that the number of sexual assaults in K-12 schools increased significantly from 6,100 in 2015 to 8,100 in 2018. This statistic doesn't include rape or the number of sexual assaults that go unreported. A 2019 article from the Girl Scouts of America website makes it crystal clear. The hard truth is that teen sexual assault is incredibly common and severely underreported. There are plenty of statistics out there about sexual assault for those aged 14 to 18, but the Girl Scouts article offers perhaps the most chilling advice about addressing teen sexual abuse: sharing our stories. To quote the article, Because aggressive and unwanted sexual behavior is so prevalent in the teen years, many of us have our own stories or know someone who has experienced sexual abuse. Not only are these victims assaulted, but when they report the abuse to the school, the system punishes them. The Atlantic in November 2018 tells the story of Rachel Bradshaw, a student who reported being raped in her high school band room and then was expelled. The previously cited 74 article reviewed 26 cases in which girls complained that they had been the victim of sexual misconduct and were subsequently punished by school administrators. The documents in these cases all revealed a similar pattern. The student reports abuse, the school investigates as a conduct violation, the victim has also been found to have violated the conduct policy, thus the victim is punished without Title IX ever being considered. An 8th grader in Hawaii reported to her school counselor that a boy was groping her. A 2018 investigation by the Office of Civil Rights reported that the counselor's response to the girl was, "Well, what do you want me to do about it?" The causes are that K-12 schools lack clear Title IX policies and qualified Title IX coordinators. First, K-12 schools often have no idea what they are doing when it comes to Title IX. Part of the problem, according to the Deseret News on January 28, 2019, is that Title IX was written for a medium-sized college campus with a compliance office and several lawyers in mind. On our college campuses, there are parallel tracks when a sexual assault is reported: the criminal case and the Title IX process. In high school, sexual assault is supposed to be reported to the police. However, there often isn't a clear Title IX process. Break the Cycle, a healthy relationship support group, wrote in 2018 that parents and school administrators often have no idea that Title IX policies also apply to K-12 schools. And second, Title IX coordinators are woefully underprepared. What we are commonly seeing is that because, as the previously cited Deseret News explains, there is no special training or certification that these coordinators are required to take, that it is not uncommon for the role to just be passed around, that it has become so unclear what these coordinators are supposed to be doing that they themselves don't realize that they hold the position. The previously cited 74 article tells the story of one school administrator getting a federal letter asking for the name of the Title IX coordinator for the district. After asking who it was, his secretary told him, "You are." In a 2012 investigation from equalrights.org, one principal responded to the question by saying, "I think that would be me." In a September 24, 2018 article from Phi Delta Kappan found that many coordinators didn't find out for months that they even were the coordinator. And if they were asked about Title IX policies, well, they would just Google it. When a young woman reported that the friends of her rapists were harassing her in the hallways of the school, her lawyer told the previously cited Deseret News that the school told her to go somewhere else if she couldn't handle it. Solutions are needed on a governmental, district, and personal level. On a governmental level, we need to create a specific office within the Department of Education to handle Title IX issues. Congresswoman Doris Matsui of California has introduced the Patsy Team Mink and the Louise M. Slaughter Gender Equity and Education Act of 2019. This bill, introduced on June 26, 2019, will create a specific office of gender equity within the Department of Education. This office would provide training and support to Title IX coordinators, research best practices, and provide grants to schools implementing Title IX initiatives. You should contact your representative to show support for this legislation as it's going to be reintroduced. On a district level, K-12 schools need to clearly identify their Title IX policies and their Title IX coordinator. The previously cited Phi Delta Kappan explained that when asking Title IX coordinators what their job duties entailed from 118 school districts in 2 states, the majority explained that Title IX amounted to just a small part of their job, less than 1% to be exact. This has to change. It is unacceptable to have people not know what they are doing as a Title IX coordinator or having to resort to Google after they are surprised to find out that this is a part of their job. On a personal level, we need to get involved. The nonprofit Stop Sexual Assault in Schools is unique in that it was created specifically to address sexual assault and sexual harassment in K-12 schools. According to their website, last updated in 2021, the best chance we have at changing the system is to provide resources to parents and students to ensure Title IX compliance at their local school. You can go to their website, stopsexualassaultinschools.org. I strongly urge and beg that you look into this and help me take action, because these students literally cannot wait another second. Today, we've discussed the problems, causes, and solutions for our poor execution of Title IX rights and sexual assault repercussions. I have been a part of the forensics community for over 10 years now, and persuasion is an important speech that gives members the chance to provide action steps so that we may solve the very issues within society that we identify. Unfortunately, during competition, the time length of this speech was only 10 minutes, and I couldn't fully elaborate on this topic as I would have liked to, but that does not mean that we stop after season ends. The advice from the Girl Scouts article was to share our stories, and it is great that after so long, survivors are finally able to do that. But that's what these young women did, and the schools ignored them, or suspended them, or expelled them. We have to do more than just listen. It is way past time that we protect the victims and fix the broken system.
Okay. Thanks, Baylen, you're so great. So I remember when I first heard your speech, and I'm guessing myself and the others in the room probably know someone in K-12, like whether that's siblings, nephews, or nieces, or cousins and everything. So I know you brought up the resource and organizations we can reach out to, but if we wanted to maybe reach out to our home high school or even in the Nottoway High School here, who would we get in contact to see if they even have those policies in place?
Well, the first thing you can definitely do is go to any school website, and it should say who their Title IX coordinator is. Now, the reality is a lot of them don't, because they don't even know themselves, or they don't have one appointed when they're supposed to. It's law that they have that in place. You could call schools and see, you could ask who's the Title IX coordinator, what kind of Title IX policies do you have in place. But honestly, a lot of them might not know. They might not have any idea, like my speech says, what Title IX actually means in the K through 12 system, and that's why we have to pass legislation. That's why we have to get educated through Stop Sexual Assault in Schools. There's also Know Your 9, a national youth-led campaign on Title IX rights. And both these websites are great sources. They have toolkits, they have videos, they have all sorts of guides to educate people on what's actually happening in these schools, because, you know, they're not handling it like they're supposed to. Instead, they're going to letting the principal decide if you've actually been assaulted. And then they just end up punishing the student, so.
I guess in your conclusion, you mentioned how there were so many other more things you would like to discuss or things that you would like to talk about, but you couldn't with the time constraints. Is there anything else that you would want us to know or for us to go out and specifically search for as we leave today?
Title IX, like I said, is also a policy at the university level that's also failing students. Now, we are above the age of 18, most of us, or all of us should be, as students, but that doesn't mean that because, you know, we're of legal age that we don't deserve to have these policies correctly in place to protect us from sexual assault, sexual harassment, you know, domestic abuse, etc. And I've learned over the past few years just how the system can fail students, and that also needs to change. Like, for example, the Title IX at the university level, it's not like a permanent record. So if you're found guilty for Title IX violations, no matter how severe they may be, that doesn't follow you to another university. You could get fired or expelled for the things that you've done to somebody, but if you don't press criminal charges, it's not the same thing. You can go on to another university and that school not know. And it just, the cycle continues. That's why there needs to be, you know, legislation and policies in place that, you know, say we can censure these people. They, you know, we know what they did. It follows them. It's not something that can just leave.
Thank you, Baylen.
Yeah, thanks.
Can we give her another hand? And in fact, can we also give a hand to all our speakers for today? For all our speakers today, can we clap for them too? Awesome. So once again, thank you all for coming out and just listening to these speeches tonight. And what I hope you gain from this is that this isn't just something that you could just say, oh, well, I went to this, now I'm so informed on all these issues. It is something that you have to consistently be researching in and to educate yourself on. And as Swaff said, making ourselves comfortable with the uncomfortable. So as you leave today, I hope that you go out and you continuously try to perfect the institutions that we are a part of for not only your own development, but for also those who come after you or those who are just deeply impacted about this. So you guys have a great night. Thank you so much.